Welcome to LearnEd Academy Group, Organizational Culture Lesson 3, How Power and Information Flow Through the Organizational Hierarchy. I'm Deb Simani and I'll be your host today. I just wanted to take a moment to remind us of the definition that we're working from with this topic that I did take from some extracts from businessdictionary.com. We have reviewed this in previous lessons, but I just want to remind us that the values and behaviors that contribute to the unique social and psychological environment of an organization is the organizational culture or corporate culture. It's shown in four main areas. We've already discussed the first, which is the ways the organization conducts its business, treats its employees, customers, and the wider community. And I did share the Zoom Master Guide with you, should you choose to want to use that as a reference tool to help you become more proficient in Zoom, to be able to host these conversations within your organization as well as in the broader community. The second, we've also talked about the extent to which freedom is allowed in decision-making, developing new ideas and personal expression. And today is the third lesson, how power and information flow through its hierarchy. And then we have one more lesson after today. And I will be sharing resources in today's lesson as well in the final lesson on this topic, which is how committed employees are towards collective objectives. So power and information flow. So power is either through formal positional authority in the organizational hierarchy or through informal influence in the relational structure or the organization's network. The formal positional authority comes from basically rank and order of the reporting lines and the level the position holder has in the organization, and it can be clearly depicted in an org chart. The informal relational influence can be understood if a stakeholder analysis is conducted and the influencers are mapped out against the organization's hierarchy structure. It is not apparent in an organizational structure, but it is built upon a direct reporting hierarchy who these key influencers are, because it has nothing to do with the rank and order. It has everything to do with how well they're connected in their network. They can be within the structure that they report into, or they can be outside of that structure and still have influence throughout the entire organization, either up through their own ranks or laterally, or they might even skip some in their own ranks and then get access to the top. So we're going to explore that and see that as well. It's very important to understand both positional authority and relational influence. Information flows formally and informally through these channels and can often impact decision-making and how the organization perceives and treats its employees and customers. So let's take a look at the stakeholder map. This is one of the tools that I want to share with you today. The stakeholder map helps to identify the organizational or project stakeholders. It could be project-based, their potential impact to the organization or project, their level of support, and their main concerns. So the idea here is to go through the entire stakeholder group, identify whether they're a critical stakeholder to either the organization, the project, or maybe the decision that's at hand. And you can rank it, them as sort of high, medium, or low as it relates to that particular objective. Then taking a look at the alignment, you can rate them from sort of a 1 to 5. And so maybe they're not at all aligned. Maybe number 2, they're not very aligned. 3, they're sort of neutral. They just don't have an opinion one way or another, and they could easily move one way or another, depending on whether they are presented with concerns or whether they're presented with benefits and impacts. And number 4 would be that they're somewhat aligned. Number 5, they're completely aligned. So this gives you a really good sense on, who your key supporters and champions are, and who's sort of neutral, who could fall either way, and who really isn't at all supportive. And perhaps you maybe need to do a little bit of seeking understanding from those individuals to see what their concerns are, because either you're going to have to mitigate those concerns, or Maybe they just are missing some key information that's already available that you can provide and help to educate them. So the key is really to seek to understand, and then keep this sort of current, because people's positions sometimes change over the course of a project or an initiative within an organization. People move around and they change and positions change, and so you really kind of need to keep your eye on this, and then sort of if you're keeping track to update it on a regular basis, or at least some frequency or interval. So then to document those issues or objections or opportunities. And again, so maybe it's providing them with more information, maybe it's mitigating what their concerns are, or maybe it's being able to leverage someone who's completely aligned, a strong supporter, to be able to help to champion and help to educate others as well. So not only are there organizational agendas, but there's also personal agendas where people really need to, have their own needs met as well. And so we really need to seek what their personal needs are and their values and the drivers for, how they would support or take decisions within an organization. And then really to be able to put this together so that you can draw yourself a plan that would provide you some ideas to help to influence those stakeholders. But as you start to map this out, then what you need to do is plot that against the org chart, because you need to understand where your influencers are situated within the structure. So the boxes in red here, they describe the positional authority. Those are pretty clear. You can see them. They're leaders within the organization. But when we start to look at the relational influence, we start to see things like this, where you might have a group of people that are, all the way down from the intern all the way up to the CEO. And you can see and hear that in this case, the executive director or the branch head is actually not part of that pocket of influence, which is interesting. And it can happen. So the CEO and the VP sometimes will go a little bit deeper into the organization, to the managers and even the administrators or the professionals, or even an intern. It can happen where they start to get some of the influence. And so that's kind of an interesting dynamic. Another example of this would be where they may not necessarily go as deep into the organization, but they certainly do include the vice president, the executive director. In this case, we can see one manager is included here, and both the admins of these executives and managers are part of this map of influence or relational influence. And then another example would be in this green pocket here, where, again, we're missing VP and executive director, which can happen. And not all the managers, but a key manager here and some professionals are able to have some relational influence. Now, that's again not to say that the executive director or the VP don't have their positional authority, because they certainly do. However, for some reason, there's some relational influence here that in this particular green case, the VP and the executive director are not a part of over here in this department or branch. Whereas in the pink example, the VP and the executive director are very much part of not only the positional authority, but the relational influence. So it's really interesting to just kind of take note of this, because it really does frame how information flows through hierarchy, because there's the formal channels and then there's the informal channels. And when there's a trust relationship with those informal channels, that relational influence can be quite strong and can be equally as strong as the positional authority. So if someone has both a relational influence, a trust factor, and a positional authority, they will tend to have probably more credence and decision-making influence and power around the executive tables. So just something to be mindful of. And these types of things really do impact culture because sometimes they're more obvious than others, but it can be subtle, and it really can shape the way that people interact. It can shape the way that people trust one another, and certainly when it comes to communications, you'll see that it can really certainly shape the culture. So what I would just like to conclude and wrap up with today is that when conducting a stakeholder analysis, mapping the data against the org chart will be required so you can find the relational structure and can visualize this against the positional authority structure. It's really important. So I hope this is helpful for you today, and I look forward to the next topic. Take care, everyone.